It's going to turn into a pretty soggy morning fairly quickly, the rain moving in here and then pushing into western Scotland as well. The winds will start to increase. So turning wet and windy across North Wales as well as northwest England. Northern Ireland actually turning a bit drier through the afternoon. Southern and eastern parts of England mostly dry and bright. A bit of sunshine could poke through, and that'll see temperatures up to 19 degrees. Elsewhere, we're in the mid-teens at best. Weather fronts continue to bring further rain across northwest Scotland. That could cause some issues by the time we get to the weekend. But further south, look at this. Temperatures on the rise. High pressure moving in. A lot of fine weather as we head into the weekend for England and Wales. And temperatures this weekend could be in the mid-20s.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Tonight, Rishi Sunak says that the political system in this country is broken. Is it? And if so, what is the answer? Proportional representation, perhaps? Would you back that? And after immense speculation, we finally got the answer, everybody. The northern leg of HS2 will indeed be scrapped. Instead, we're going to have the Northern Network. Apparently, every single penny saved by not doing HS2 will be invested there instead. Do you believe that? You tell me. Also, smoking is going to be phased out. Is that a good health policy or the nanny state gone mad? And today there was lots of talk today about being tough on crime. And get this, the policing minister has suggested that you and I, the great British public, we need to start getting out there, getting more involved and starting to make citizens arrests. Would you do that? I really want to get into that. I'm fascinated to hear whether or not you actually would intervene and whether or not you would even know how to do a citizen's arrest. And if you're wondering where are the police, why can't they get involved? Well, half of them seem to be at Lawrence Fox's house. Anyway, we're going to get into all of that. And I also want to know from you tonight, Rishi Sunak was introduced to the stage at the conference today by his wife. What about that? Was it great teamwork or just a little bit weird? We've got it all to come, but before we do that, let's grab tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Speaking after weeks of speculation, Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country, and he's defended the move, saying the money will be better spent developing projects in the North and the Midlands. HS2 will still run from London Euston, but current management will no longer be responsible, he said.
We will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
Well, the former Prime Minister David Cameron has criticised that announcement, saying that a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity has been lost. And the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has also said the new investment plan doesn't create a coherent network.
When money is given to projects, you want to support those projects, but the question is, do they form a coherent transport plan? Because if you have to make the most out of investment, you've got to make sure it all knits together and it makes a coherent network. And I don't think this plan does that. They've localised what was a coherent plan. And we've now got to try and kind of make sense of the good bits and work together with other mayors and leaders across the North to turn it into something that will actually work for us.
Well, the Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, says the new plan is a great compromise.
So obviously I'm very disappointed that he announced that today. As you know, I've fought for it to be maintained, fought hard, valiantly on behalf of my region. So, of course, disappointed. But remember, the line is going to run from Euston to Handsacre, where it will join the West Coast Main Line. So compared to what could have happened, this is a good compromise position.
Well, away from HS2, in his speech, the Prime Minister also reaffirmed his commitment to stop small boats crossing the English Channel.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Now, I am confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
Well, a raft of other policies were also announced in Rishi Sunak's keynote speech, which lasted nearly an hour. On education, he said he'd bring together A-levels and T-levels to create a new advanced British standard, with students studying 5 separate subjects. He also said he's going to bring forward measures to restrict the availability of vapes to children, and he proposed raising the smoking age. Now, away from the Tory party conference, the Countess of Chester Hospital is under investigation for corporate manslaughter. It follows Lucy Letby's murder convictions, the former nurse jailed for life after killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit. Cheshire Constabulary has confirmed it will be focusing on the period between June 2015 and 2016. It says it's considering investigating areas including senior leadership to determine whether or not any criminality had taken place. A British Army investigation believes a 19-year-old soldier who took her own life after relentless sexual harassment by one of her bosses. Royal Artillery gunner Jaisley Beck was found dead at Lark Hill Camp in Wiltshire in December 2021. A report describes an intense period of unwelcome behaviour and says it's almost certain this was a causal factor in her death. And a murder investigation's been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland last night. Police responded just before 7 p.m. following reports a dog had injured a 54-year-old. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second dog has been seized. And a sixth person has been arrested in connection with the Crooked House pub fire in Staffordshire. A 23-year-old man from Leicestershire was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent. He's been released on conditional bail while the investigation continues. 4 men and a woman were previously arrested in connection with the fire that destroyed the iconic pub in August. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, and Peter Edwards, a former editor of Labour List. Good evening to both of you, gentlemen. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three. It is very much about you guys at home as well. So what's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you email me, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Now, of course, the story again dominating the headlines, the airways, of course, the Tory party conference over in Manchester, its final day today. And Rishi Sunak, of course, dominating the stage, as we've just been hearing his speech for about an hour. Many people are making lots of kind of noise about how his speech was actually introduced. I'll show you who introduced him.
Rishi and I are each other's best friends. We're one team. And I could not imagine being anywhere else but here today.
Yeah, there you go. Very sweet. That was his wife. She took to the stage. She gave quite the performance, actually, saying about, as you just heard it, her best friend and talking about how they've met and their daughters and their family and the teamwork and all the rest of it. Very fascinating stuff. But has it got any place on a political stage? You tell me. Richard, what do you make to that?
Actually, I thought it was great. I thought it shows that they're a strong team. And look, being in politics is really difficult. It's brutal, it's tough. And having someone, a close partner by your side, I thought it showed real strength and all credit to it. It's not easy going up on a stage like that. I thought it was a good opener, good intro for him. And, yeah, all credit to him.
Warm words from Richard. Peter, do you agree with that?
I quite like it because all politicians are human beings and we can argue about the policy and the substance that we're going to do in a moment, but to just remind everyone listening at home, if there is anyone listening at home, that these are human beings.
What do you mean, if there's anyone listening?
Peter, that's outrageous.
Peter,
Tory conference.
We are one of the fastest-growing programmes on this network.
That was a reference to Tory conference.
Off with his head. Go on.
That was a reference to Tory conference, not to your show. So I think it's a good thing because it shows the human side of anyone. And, we'll argue about the policies, but politicians do get terrible abuse. But the point I'd make is actually the spouse, whether male or female, tends to come on stage when the leader is losing or behind in the polls. And I think that's...
Gordon Brown's wife, she did the same.
And she did great. She did great. And I think Theresa May's husband, Philip May, made 1 or 2 interventions. I can't remember if they were at a party conference. But it's generally a sign when a leader's on the back foot.
Well, again, I am a lone voice on this panel because I thought it was very sweet and it's wonderful to have a supportive partner. And yes, if you're in a team and all the rest of it. But I personally thought it was a little bit weird. Your wife kind of having to do this talk for you. I just thought it was like, it's like your mum going into school and, like, I don't know, sticking up for you because you're not doing a good job or something. I personally thought it was a little bit odd. But you can be the final judge of that. Let's get into the main thrust of it, though, because one of the key things that I found fascinating today from Rishi's actual speech was the state of the political system in this country. Let's listen.
The feeling that Westminster is a broken system, and the same goes for Holyrood, Cardiff Bay and Stormont. It isn't anger, It's an exhaustion with politics. In particular, politicians saying things and then nothing ever changing. And you know what? People are right.
Again, I have a puzzled look on my face because sometimes when I'm listening to the stages today and previous days on the Tory party conference, I do find myself asking the same question. But you've been in power for the last, 13 years? And some people on these stages over the last couple of days have been talking as though they've literally only just walked to that stage and grasped power for the first time. And yes, I know Rishi's only just become Prime Minister, but notwithstanding that, the Tories have had the control for a decade plus. Anyway, do you think the political system is broken?
Yeah, I do. And I think, but it is laughable that it comes from a Conservative leader. Their party's been in charge for 13 years. He's been in the cabinet for about 3.5 years and been responsible for much of the catastrophe that we now face. What we need actually is proportional representation so that every vote counts, every vote's equal, and then you get far more democratic engagement. That's the real reason that politics is so broken in this country, because for too many people, their vote doesn't count, they don't get listened to. You've got in this two-party system, you've got too many safe seats, and there's a lack of competition, a lack of new entrants. And I think that's what the majority of the country wants, and I think we should have a referendum on PR as soon as possible.
I shall come back to you on that. But Peter, do you agree?
I think it shows the difficulties of running as a change candidate when you've been in government for so long. And Rishi Sunak's very young, he's very energetic and he's quite intelligent. But it's the bind that will be above and beyond party conference in the year before the election, where he's saying, I'm all about changing the country. But every time he mentions that, a journalist or someone on doorstep will say, here are the things that your government has done I don't agree with. And that's why he's ended up with the policies of today, which are kind of, they're tweaks or cancellations around HS2 and A-levels. They're not radical reforming gestures. And he said, politics is broken. Well, I mean, that's a bit of an empty statement, but he didn't say how he'd fix it.
This PR thing, I mean, we had a referendum in 2011, and it was, I think I've got the stats here, actually, in terms of who voted and the outcome. The final result was yes to PR. We only got 32%.
No, it was no to PR, so it was to keep the same.
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, the yes vote was 32% and the no vote was 67.9%. So people overwhelmingly rejected proportional representation.
But that was a long time ago, Michelle. Politics and the country was in a very different place then, and it was a PR system that, frankly, I don't think people wanted either. And I think, frankly, if you've got a big question like that, every 15 years, you should re-ask the question. And I think that more and more people recognise that this two-party system that is supposed to bring us a strong, stable government has actually brought us exactly the opposite. It's brought us chaos, incompetent government, and what we need new entrants, we need far more people to get involved in the democratic. But here's the key thing.
But the pushback to that, people will be saying, well, you're talking about chaos. You're going to probably see more coalitions, probably more chaos under a PR system.
Almost every developed nation has some form of PR. The only other country in Europe that has first past the post, Belarus. It's not great company. And the average turnout under PR is 10% higher. That's another 3 million people in the UK that would feel it's worth getting involved in the democratic process. And I think all of us who support and treasure democracy, we should absolutely enhance that. And it encourages new ideas, new people, disruptors. And that's a good thing for democracy.
And you said, at the last Labour Party conference, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a motion put there and overwhelmingly, as I understand it, Labour members voted in favour of having PR. Was you one of them? Would you support that?
I think it's a bit of a quagmire. So, yeah, Labour leaderships have generally not been in favour of PR, and obviously if you're one of the two biggest parties, you're running that party, you wouldn't want to let in, without wishing to be rude, the smaller guys over here, the fringe parties. But, yeah, Labour members are increasingly in favour of PR. But bear in mind, when we had the referendum, which was, I think, 11 or 12 years ago, that was not for pure PR, that was for a particular strand, and, without getting bogged down that now.
It was the alternative vote,
exactly, it wasn't for pure PR. But I think it's worth having that debate, but not right now, because we got cost of living crisis, we got a war in Europe and record NHS waiting
There's
lists.
never a good time. You've got to challenge this stuff. And here's the thing about this, it'll always lead to coalition. Wales, devolved assembly, is elected under PR. Scotland, Holyrood, is elected under PR. You've had the SNP dominating for a decade. You've had Labour dominating for 20 years in Labour. So it doesn't necessarily need you. If that's what the people want, that's what they'll get. So actually, that completely trashes the idea that it'll always lead to coalitions.
Well, that's not quite right. Very briefly, in Scotland, the SNP rely on the support of the Greens to stay in power.
To a tiny degree, but they've controlled Holyrood for at least 10 years, if not 15. So I think that actually sort of just completely kiboshes the idea that it always leads to a coalition.
But is it ever really going to happen? Because say, like, I don't know, say Labour win, before you've even won, in your manifesto, if you put PR, Labour surely would not benefit from that. If you have a PR referendum at the next election, so not the first one that you're going to get elected in the next one, Labour would lose seats to that, and so would the Tories.
Well, I'd be really surprised if it was in the Labour manifesto this time around. Say Labour did get elected, as you mentioned, the party members seem to be turning a bit more in favour of PR. Don't rely purely on conference because that's a system of delegates. It's not hundreds of thousands of Labour members. But if Labour got into power, I think there'd be a big internal debate about PR, and it's possible it might 4 years down the track pop up in a manifesto. But don't expect to see a commitment in the next 12 months. I'd be amazed if there was.
But that's what I mean. So then, how would that proposition
quite easily,
ever get
because
through?
if Labour have a very small working majority, or if they have some form of coalition with another party, let's say, for example, the Lib Dems, it will be in the Lib Dems manifesto in the same way it'll be in our manifesto, and then it's part of the negotiating leverage, and that's how the referendum came about last time, because the Lib Dems demanded it as part of the coalition with the Conservatives back in 2010.
You're very optimistic, because I just...
You have to be optimistic to be in politics.
I'm just not sure that I can ever imagine a scenario, because the two main people that could put that referendum to us, it is literally against their best interest to do that. So I know what you're saying about, you can have this coalition and all the rest of it, but maybe I'm being pessimistic. Also, as well, he was not just talking about potential... Well, he wasn't talking about PR at all, actually. That's us talking about that. And if we didn't go down the PR route, how else could you fix the political system in this country?
It's a really good question, and I think what people are sick and tired of, actually, is politicians standing up, say they're going to do something, and then not doing it. So the Tories have every manifesto for the last 13 years, they've said they're going to reduce immigration, and they've done exactly the opposite. And so people get more and more disheartened. That's a disaster for democracy, because people either give up voting, say it's not worthwhile, and that's an absolute tragedy. So, and take today, he's talked about changing the A-level system and T-levels. Look at the detail. 10 years down the track, he's going to be long gone. There's a complete abandonment of any ambition. If you want to do something, get on with it. Don't wait 10 years to change something.
Do you agree with that?
A-level reform is only for part of the United Kingdom, i.e. England only. I don't think it'll make much difference on the doorstep. It's baffling why it's 10 years' time, and I'm not sure it's going to change educational standards. And it goes back to I know you want to wrap up, but my first point, which is, where's the story from Rishi Sunak's speech? It's bits and bobs here and there that don't add up to very much.
Well, one of my viewers, James, has said, please can you ask Richard the following question? If he thinks we should re-ask the big questions like PR every 15 years, does he also apply that to EU membership? Does he think we should have another referendum on EU membership in 2031?
I would have no problem after 15 and 20 years, and as long as the job's been done properly in the interim, we would win it by an absolute landslide, Michelle, no doubt at all.
So if you do indeed get elected, then you will be campaigning for a second referendum in 2031.
First of all, we'll do Brexit properly, and then the country will be hugely grateful, and it just won't be an issue.
There you go, James. Did that answer your question? Get in touch, tell me. After the break, we've been speculating now for some weeks, probably, about HS2. We finally know the answer. The northern leg to Manchester has indeed been scrapped. The Northern Network will take its place. What do you make to that? Get in touch, you tell me.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7 o'clock, Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, alongside me, as is Peter Edwards, a former editor of the Labour List. You guys have been getting in touch. Debbie says, oh, come on, Michelle. What's the matter with you? Rishi's wife did a fabulous job introducing her husband. It was not weird at all. She says, in fact, actually, it was a nice personal insight to Rishi, and it's made Debbie warm to Rishi even more than he did, Richard said. Michelle, can you stop being so cold and so cynical, please? It was a lovely human touch for Rishi's wife to introduce him. Barbara says, yes, Rishi's wife was great. Gordon Brown's wife did the same, but that didn't end well at all. And Joe says, Michelle, I'm with you. Yes, I am a Conservative, but I found Sunak's wife's appearance odd and a little bit weird. Well, that one divides opinion. It's weird, isn't it? The things that get people talking. Lots of response as well on that PR one, and I'll bring you into that conversation in a couple of minutes. But for now, listen, we've finally got the answer that we were wondering about the HS2 and whether or not that northern leg up to Manchester would be scrapped. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
See, HS2 really does divide a lot of people, and he's come in, it's like he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, really, because there's some people that just, you've said you're going to do it, so stick to what you're doing and just do it, whatever the cost and all the rest of it. Then the flip side of people will be like, look, if it doesn't make sense, then just get rid. One of my viewers is asking, can you ask Peter, if Labour win the next election, would they reinstate that northern leg?
I believe not, and Labour leadership had relatively mixed messages on that up till today. Personally, I was agnostic. There's no way, I believe, they've not said, there's only been a few hours, but there's no way I'd be amazed if Labour came out tomorrow and said they'd bring back HS2 to Manchester, because it's a massive infrastructure spending commitment. The money's been reallocated. Remember, Labour's biggest commitment is to work up to £28 billion a year on green spending. So Labour aren't going to contradict this tomorrow morning.
So how come they've not come out then championing what he said and celebrating it and high-fiving his new policy?
Well, it's interesting. Can we talk for a minute about the media management of this? So traditionally, the other party goes quiet when your rival's having their party conference for exactly that reason. You think whatever you say will just be drowned out by the noise of the Prime Minister or leader of the opposition. My other puzzle is this, that Rishi Sunak, it could be his only conference as party leader, depending on when the election is, were they to lose. And the Tories have been very slick in terms of the back office, but they go into this week with their number one story in Manchester about scrapping a railway to Manchester, and that was leaked out last week. So the top line of his speech today was something that upsets the North, and we've known about for a week. I mean, you have to be highly questioning how that ends up being top story today. We're in Manchester, scrapping a scheme to Manchester, and it's a week old.
Let's listen to Andy Burnham, his response.
Does this country have the will within it to actually prioritise the north of England and sort out its transport problems? Does this country have it within it to stop treating people here in the north as second-class citizens when it comes to transport and put them at the front of the queue rather than the back of the queue when it comes to investment? These are still open questions, and they've not been answered by the Prime Minister today.
See, I would answer Andy's question by saying no, actually. I don't think the government headed up in Westminster does have the will to prioritise the North. And I know, by the way, there'll be loads of people at home saying, stop calling Manchester the North, Michelle, because to them it's the Midlands. I hear you. But do you actually think this £36 billion, they're going to do what they say they will, and actually hundreds of these wonderful new projects are going to kind of speed up, quicken up, connect the North?
Look, once again, actually, the Tories are copying half of a reform policy, because we said in June 2019, as the Brexit Party, you should scrap the whole of HS2 and spend 50 million quid. And I listed out...
Even the London-Birmingham bit?
Absolutely. And I listed out dozens of projects in the Midlands and the North that should be done. They should have listened to me then rather than waste tens of billions of pounds. You should scrap the existing one. Never pour good money after the bad. The existing scheme from Euston to a suburb of Birmingham that no one's ever heard of, frankly, it is useless. It'll be far too expensive. It won't achieve what's necessary. And I still think that they will delay and prevaricate on these projects in the North, and they've got to accelerate that and properly go for it.
Do you think there's enough political kind of workings together? Because one of the things that worries me is that you'll hear about people like Andy Burnham and stuff saying we're barely consulted in this, of course, because he's in the opposition. And I kind of think there's a part of me, and yes, I understand how politics works, and yes, I understand government versus opposition. But on some of these things that really are going to impact people's lives for decades and decades to come, I wish that there was a lot more cross-party working. Do you think that's realistic? Do you just think I'm away with the fairies wanting that?
No, I don't think I'm away with the fairies at all. I think it's a very good question. I mean, I've lived in Leeds and York and Carlisle, England's most northerly town, and transport infrastructure's a real problem, and it's worse the further north you get, in Cumbria particularly. George Osborne's big idea was this kind of a Northern Alliance, this Northern Partnership, and after leaving office he set up a think tank. But that was 6 or 7 years ago, and since then there seems to have been a deceleration of progress and fallings out among borough leaders in the north, and then between people like Andy Burnham, who's a regional mayor with greater powers because of Osborne, having a fallout with central government. And not all of this is about left-right dividing lines. It's about the detail of execution and delivery and infrastructure commitments.
Alan says, I live in the north of England and I think scrapping HS2 is a sound idea. The opportunities to improve transport in the north now will be much more beneficial. Tyron says, I'm glad it's been scrapped. One of the single best improvements to the rail infrastructure in the north would be to electrify and increase capacity on the Trans-Pennine line and increase capacity the whole way,
briefly, that's what a lot of people in the north think, electrification from the east all the way across to Manchester. That is hugely popular.
But then I thought, this is when Labour was in power, they didn't do much of that electrification.
They did do one. I think it might have been in Yorkshire or the North East. I'm sure someone will write in and tell us. But I think electrification technology has moved on enormously in the 15 years since.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing holding back the north is the lack of infrastructure from east to west and up to Newcastle and Carlisle and places. It's a disaster. Anybody commuting up there knows just how bad it is.
Getting a train from Scarborough to Manchester is not much fun.
Many of these projects are semi-oven ready and should get on with them hard and fast.
Who's this? Ollie says, what about, do you reckon the government will build a tram line across the River Humber that links East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire? He quite rightly, obviously you've got the Humber Bridge, but he quite rightly points out it's a nightmare to even get from A to B there, and I would completely back you on that. But I ask you again, are you north of Manchester when you hear us talking about the North, do you sit there screaming at your screen saying, what about us? How's your transport? Do you think anyone actually takes you guys seriously? Do you think you need a little bit more? Get in touch and tell me. GBviews at gbnews.com. After the break, I want to talk to you about cigarettes. Do you think it's right that Rishi Sunak is basically trying to phase them out? A 14-year-old today will not ever be able to legally buy cigarettes. Good health policy or nanny state gone mad? You tell me.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, and Peter Edwards, a former editor of Labour List. Lots of you guys getting in touch again. You're really quite divided on this HS2 situation. Sylvie says, can everyone who moans about HS2 being cancelled, can you tell them all not to worry? Because apparently there's some people will say that Conservatives are not going to get elected next year, so you can leave it for the Labour Party to reintroduce it. But as we've just been hearing, I suspect that will not be the case. Neil says, again, I'm a Northerner and I see this as a win-win situation. You do believe that Rishi and the rest of them will follow up with what they're saying and spend what, £36 billion on transport in the north? You're a trusting man, I'll give you that. Now let's talk cigarettes, shall we? Because the age at which people can buy cigarettes and tobacco in England is basically looking likely to be risen by 1 year every year. Are you following me? The essence will be that ultimately, say if you're a 14-year-old kid now, you would never be able to legally buy cigarettes. I think he's nicked this policy, Rishi, from New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. That was something that they were into over there. But let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Smoking places huge pressures on the NHS and costs our country £17 billion a year. We have a chance to cut cancer deaths by a quarter, significantly ease those pressures and protect our children, and we should take it.
See, the number of people smoking is actually massively, I mean, when you look at any graph, it's such a stark decline. In 2022, 13% there or thereabouts of people over the age of 18 smoked. It's rapidly declining. Do we need this policy?
No, of course not. I mean, this is sort of nanny state nonsense that people just don't need. It really is. And do you know what it'll do? It'll drive it underground. Guess what'll happen? If you're a 15-year-old now and you can't buy cigarettes in 3 or 4 years' time, then you'll either pretend you're of a different age, or you'll get your mates to buy it, or maybe it'll increase the likelihood that you go and smoke drugs or something else. That's what happens. If you try and bury something and stop it, it'll go underground. Much better to keep banging the health message, it's bad for you. But actually, do you know what? Individual responsibility is a good thing. Used to be a Conservative thing, but now apparently not. No, nanny knows best.
I don't know why anyone smokes. I think it's absolutely gross.
Agreed.
I've lost my sense of smell, so I've not been able to smell for a couple of years now. But I can always remember.
You smell great. Don't worry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, good. I take your word for it. But I can always remember, particularly before they banned smoking in pubs, you would come home from a night out, you take your clothes off. The next morning, when you pick your clothes up, they absolutely stank. I've never understood why anyone would voluntarily choose to inhale this stuff, smell like that. But to Richard's point, isn't it just a free choice?
I think it's a good policy, actually, by Rishi Sunak today, because I just think there isn't a case for allowing or even encouraging people to smoke. You know, I smoked a bit as a teenager at university, and it's kind of a social thing. You pick it up, it's going on around you, you join in. But I don't think the policy announcement today, I don't think will be seen as contentious in 10 years' time. And cast your minds back about 15, 16 years to when Labour banished smoking indoors in England, and the Scottish administration did the same. There was a big debate about that in the country and internally within the Labour Party. John Reid said something about it was a pleasure for working class folk. It's not contentious anymore. It's been accepted.
How's a retailer going to enforce it? Someone who walks in, they're 23. Another person walks in, they're 25. And he has to say, can I see your ID, please, to check whether the 25-year-old can buy a pack of fags and you, the 23-year-old, no, you can't. It's ludicrous.
But that's what they do now with booze.
Exactly. There are lots of age-restricted products.
Not when you're in your mid-20s.
Yeah, but they do. So, for example, I tried to buy, I don't know, paracetamol or whatever today. The guy had to come over and check the contents that I had, made sure I didn't have more than 2 bags or whatever it was, looked at my age. When you buy knives in a shop, when you buy
you shouldn't be able to buy
booze,
any knives in a shop.
No, but people buy kitchen knives. You buy knives if you need a knife. I'm not saying a zombie knife, just a normal kitchen knife. There's restrictions age-wise on loads of products.
Yeah, but I just think you're just increasing that role of nanny state. You're making it harder for the retailers, and I just think you're going to drive it underground. If someone wants to smoke when they're in the mid-20s or their 30s in half a dozen years' time, they will find a way. All you're doing is just driving stuff underground. And I don't buy all this stuff about it'll save the NHS, this and that. You've got the tax revenues from it. Yeah, if you want to be really brutal about it, on the other side of the argument, if you're foolish enough to smoke all your life, yes, you know full well that you're probably going to die early.
What about vaping? Because in 2023, apparently so far, 20.5% of children have tried vaping. How come no one's focusing on that?
It's a really good question, and I do think there are real issues about vaping. But again, if you ban all of this stuff, it'll just go underground. You've got to keep it more open, more aware, and with education, I think that's the thing, as opposed to just saying, nanny knows best about this, that and the other.
Peter?
Oh, I think Richard's point is much more conceptual and ideological. I think Richard's someone from the libertarian side who doesn't like banning things full stop. I think on the specifics of this, there's no evidence that smoking will go underground, and I think the declining revenue of cigarette manufacturing will decline at a much quicker rate. As any economist will tell you, supply will go down, consumption will go down, demand will go down. I don't think it'll be driven underground. And I think Richard's entitled to his view, but I think it's much more just ideological. The libertarian side doesn't like banning things, whereas people like me would say it's a trade-off between our own liberty and government intervention. And I'm happy with this trade-off because it will save us, it will save our relatives. Passive smoking is pretty ghastly, and it will save the state money.
Where do you draw the line in terms of not banning stuff then? Would you sit there and say, right, well, heroin should be legal then?
No, I think you have to have an open, genuine debate about this stuff. But what you know is the more you ban, the more stuff goes underground. You know how easy it is, for example, to get cannabis, marijuana, all of this stuff is banned, yet you can get it within, not that I do, but let's hasten to add.
Yeah, you sound very knowledgeable on this
I'm told, Michelle, that you can get it very easy, very quickly. And exactly the same will happen with cigarettes. If people want to smoke and they're in their 20s and they're not allowed to, that's what they'll do. So I just think, yeah, ideologically, I'm trying to reduce the amount of things that you ban. I think it's wrong. But nevertheless, you've got to, with education, you've got to say, look, drugs are bad for you. You're much more likely to get addicted and, frankly, end up dead way early with hard drugs. And people, I think, know the same with cigarettes. It's a serious personal choice.
Would you legalise cannabis then?
I think the country should have a proper open debate about that. There are huge problems with drugs. But there also, we've got the moment we've got the worst of all worlds at the moment, which is for 40 years we're fighting a drugs war and everybody knows we're losing it. So you can't keep on doing something that you know is failing.
But what would your position be if you was having that debate? Where would you sit on it?
I'm actually at the moment I'm still quite undecided. I was quite thoughtful about it. I'm now very anxious about it. But I think you've got to have a proper grown-up national debate and actually maybe let the people decide rather than politicians.
But, I mean, you would spend your life having never-ending referendums.
I love referendums. We're quite good at them, Michelle. We tend to win them. That's why they don't want a referendum on net zero. It's why they don't want a referendum on other stuff.
Because everyone will be sitting there.
They get lots of things done in Sweden and in states in America where they have lots and lots of referendums.
But then isn't it your job as the politicians to actually make decisions for us rather than getting everyone constantly involved?
But you've just said at the beginning, and the Prime Minister said politics is broken. Why is it broken? Because the politicians are so out of touch with the people. Trust the people more. Ask them more. Get them involved.
Is that what you want, you guys at home? How politically engaged are you? Are you sitting there going, yes, sign me up, I want to do all the referendums you will throw at me? Or do you sit there going, pack it in, politicians, you make the decisions, you decide? Lots of you getting in touch asking a question. Michelle, if you're going to ban smoking, why don't you ban alcohol as well? Whoa there. Whoa there. That's what I say. Steady on. Steady on. You can't take my G&T away from me. Right, I can tell you, there's a very interesting topic up next. You, me, members of the public, do you think we should be getting involved more in fighting crime? Would you make a citizen's arrest if you saw something bad unfolding in front of you? That is the suggestion from the policing minister. We'll get into that after the break.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Richard Tice, Peter Edwards still alongside me. Stuart says, Michelle, just because you enjoyed a crafty fag behind the bike sheds doesn't mean that you should be encouraging today's youth to smirk. It's like the planet of the vapes out there as it is. Well, first and foremost, I don't think I've ever had a crafty fag behind the bike sheds, and I don't think I'm encouraging anyone to smirk. Helen says, I'm 21, and I would say that 90% of my friends vape, but none of them have ever tried smirking. You think that the policy is ridiculous. Simon says Peter's a hypocrite. How come he was allowed to try smirking before he opted out, but if he had his way, the youth would not be even allowed to try it and make their own decisions? Michael says, Michelle, will you stop attacking smirkers? I've smoked since I was 14 years old and I've had no problems at all. It's not my policy. I'm merely here just to debate it. It's not me coming up with these ideas. Anyway, on this referendum situation, Paul said, what are you going to do next? Have a referendum about having referendums? Don't put ideas into his head. That's what I would say to you. Who's this? Martin says, Michelle, please, can you just let the politicians decide on our behalf? We don't need ongoing referendums. Well, again, that one is dividing opinions, because who's this? Phil, he says, yes, 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 in capital letters. He says we could have a monthly referendum and we could all vote by app. Cool, blimey. Can you imagine the state our country would be in then? I don't know if some of you might say it'd be in an even better state. Keep your thoughts coming in. Now, let me ask you this. If you saw, I don't know, a shoplifter, something going on that shouldn't be, would you step in and intervene, do a citizen's arrest perhaps? Because Chris Philip, the policing minister, he has basically called on retailers to ask people to get their security guards, to intervene where safe as possible. Us members of the public, perhaps we could be chipping in and doing citizens' arrests as well. What do you make to it?
Yeah, actually, do you know what? I think if I saw a shoplifter, I'd like to think I would intervene and say, you know, that's you're breaking the law. No, and stop it. I mean, in an ideal world,
that'd tell them. Richard Tice, you with your family pack of cheddar, you're breaking the law. Stop it. Okay.
No, it's not that. It's when they're you know, taking off shelf loads of stuff. And these feral gangs of youths, I think we've got to stop it now. In an ideal world, the police would be there, and there would be a proper deterrent, and people would know it's illegal. But here's the thing, Michelle: it's because of the lack of police presence, complete lack of the justice system putting away shoplifters. If people trusted the fact there was a real deterrent, then a lot of this nonsense, the shoplifting, the knife crime, would disappear.
Should that be the policing priority? Should they be in shops?
Broken windows, absolutely. You should have police on the high streets, not behind their desks, because you've got to have the sort of New York broken window style policy where you have zero tolerance for shoplifting, for graffiti, for antisocial behaviour, and then that actually, if you deal with that, then you get a sense of respect. People know, if you're caught shoplifting, you're taken away, you're off the streets, you're out, you're gone, and your mates too. Then you get some respect.
Well, and your mates too.
No, then your mates know that there's a proper deterrent, there's a proper consequence to your illegal actions.
I mean, look at this, what I'm showing you on the screen, everyone. If you're listening, not watching, take my word for it, right? What you're seeing is absolutely disgusting. These are young people. They are, sorry to be rude, but they are like animals. And then some of you will get in touch saying, don't insult animals. But I don't know who you think you are. They're going into this shop. They're jumping around on whatever display unit is, thinking they can nick whatever it is that they feel like grabbing. And off they go, running off. The security guard there, I mean, you know, I don't mean to be rude to him, but he's not really doing much stopping of the people there. What do you make to it all?
Well, people of all ages commit crime. I wouldn't single out one demographic group like young people. But I think my worry is a couple of things.
Come on, the pensioners are going out and jumping on display units and trying to nick plasma screens.
I agree it's unlikely, but one video doesn't amount to a whole...
Oh, that's not... Oh, come on,
Come on, Peter. It's all over the place. Everybody's seeing it in every high street in the country. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Shoplifting has increased, that's a fact, but I'm saying I've no idea which demographic carries out most. Anyway, let's talk about
well,
what
I bet my bottom dollar it's not the pensioners.
Well, of course not. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to do about it. So I think we'd all like to be go heroes, and if we see someone breaking the law, we'd all like to intervene. That's perfectly reasonable. But as your clip showed...
But look at this as well. Who do you think you are? He's opening a bag, everyone. If you're listening, not watching, he's got like a hold all thing. My eyesight, I've got 4 eyes. I'm looking at this and I can't see what those items are. But he's in a fridge, picking and choosing whatever he wants, filling his bag with it. Look at him.
But, Michelle, would it be fair to say that shoplifting, which is often covert, is kind of over within seconds? And I'd imagine if you're quietly in a supermarket doing your shopping and there's a kerfuffle and someone running off, the whole incident could be over in 30 or 60 seconds. I suspect people are going to be preoccupied. But take a step back to the actual politics. You know, David Cameron, if in 2010 he said, we're having austerity, we're cutting spending, we're closing police stations, but it's all right because you can do the arresting yourselves, I think we'd have laughed our head off at that, wouldn't we?
Well, I bet there's a segment of society out there that would quite like to get involved, actually, that would quite like...
well, join the police then, don't do it yourself.
No, actually, no, but this has been... You can have a citizen's arrest. It's been the law since, I think, 1967. Actually, do you know what? I think it's a bit of a sort of a social community thing. You want your community, your high street, your local folk to feel safe. You want these scumbags that are doing this stealing. You want them to feel the consequences of their actions. What we've got, again, nanny state. If you touch someone, that's an assault. No, if you're breaking the law, if you're stealing, you're thieving, someone might feel your shoulder and, you know, frankly, people have got to understand that communities up and down this country are sick and tired of it. We don't want it and we want it sorted.
But would you sort it? That is the million-dollar question that I'm asking. Yeah, because I like to think that I put myself in the way of stuff that I perhaps shouldn't do. But since I've become a mum, I do sit there now and I think, because I've got a strong sense of right and wrong, and I don't like to see people doing what's, you know, criminally wrong and all the rest of it. But then there is a small part of me now that goes, actually, Michelle, you've got a little boy. So, yes, you can rescue that pack of Cathedral City in your local Tesco, but you might not get home to your son as a result if you get stabbed. And I think that this is in people's minds now because people seem to be, anyway, getting more and more violent. They seem to be, you know, no qualms at all about pulling out a knife and stabbing you. And if, on the flip side, you do decide, actually, I'm not having this, I'm going to get hold of him, if you dare touch somebody in the wrong way, within 2 minutes, they're running off to whoever it is, saying that they've been assaulted by you.
Exactly. And so those sort of, you know, what I call pathetic assault laws, frankly, need reassessing. Because if you're committing a crime, if it's on video, it's clear as day, then frankly you're going to suffer the consequences. And here's the point about knife crime. Again, one strike and you should be taken away for 4 or 5 years, locked up, and guess what?
Prisons are full. Prisons are full as it is.
Build some more detention centres. The people want knife crime stopped, and that's frankly a feeble excuse for not getting people who carry knives off the streets.
Well, that's the point that Mel's making as well, that prisons are indeed full. Mark says, again, Michelle, you would interrupt someone, you'd hurt someone, you'd stop them, and then you yourself would end up in prison. Again, I hear you. Lots of people saying that if they were security guards, would they want to get involved? Because ultimately you could then lose your
You
job.
wouldn't, if you're doing it under the powers of a citizen's arrest, which you're allowed to do under, I think it's Section 3 of the 1967 Criminal Law Act, frankly, that should be broadened. Why not make it, you know, a positive part of community action? You're going to stop these tow rags ruining people's societies, causing antisocial behaviour. I think the country would love it, frankly.
Do you?
Yes.
Do you share that enthusiasm?
No, and I think you've really answered why, which is the public, which are ordinary folk like us, are not always trained to judge risk. We're certainly not trained in how to kind of wrestle someone to the ground. And as you said, anyone who's got someone we love, which is, you know, all of us, they'd think, would we want to put ourselves in harm's way? So I would like to think I'd do something about it, but it's entirely reasonable. People do have that moment of hesitation saying, you know, I'm a single parent, what if I get a knife somewhere nasty?
But then, do you know what? There is something to be said about coming together as a collective, because some of these people, they run around thinking they could do whatever it is that they feel like doing. And actually, if there was a collective of people that said, you know what, as a community, as a unit, we're going to stand and we're going to say, no, we're not having that, we'll stand together, there is a collection of us, then some of these people that are behaving in this way, they might, just might, think twice. And I'll tell you what I would love to do. I'd like to be the CCTV operator in a shop, because you can spot some of these people a mile off, and I would be there going, right, you on aisle 2 with your grey tracksuits and your brown hair, put that pack of bacon back. I've seen you. We're not having it. I'd humiliate them. I'd shame them into putting that bacon back.
And frankly, Michelle, there's no reason to have a hood up or a mask on in shops. No hoods, no masks. The CCTV can see you. The evidence is there.
There you go. We're watching you. Richard Tice certainly is. Anyway, look, Peter Edwards, thank you for your company. Richard Tice, thank you for yours as well. We will keep this conversation going again tomorrow. But for now, time is up. Nigel Farage up next. Have a good night. Night-night.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A little bit of a mixed picture as we end off the day. We've got rain lingering across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Will just sink its way southwards into parts of Northern England as well before generally petering off into the second half of the night. Though some other areas of rain just beginning to push their way into parts of Northern Ireland throughout the early hours as well. A good amount of cloud around will hold up the temperatures for most places around 11-13 degrees Celsius, but parts of Northern Scotland will drop off a touch more down into those single figure values under the clearer skies we have here. This rain will then spread its way in as we head throughout Thursday. Quite a damp start to the day for Northern Ireland, then into Western Scotland, Western England and Wales also seeing a fair amount of rain throughout the day. Past southeastern areas of England, though, staying largely dry with some sunny spells here, so a relatively fine day across the board. Will be quite breezy for most of us, taking the edge off some of those temperatures a touch, but 19 degrees Celsius possible in the south, generally more around 16 to 17 degrees Celsius further north. Into Friday, this mixture of low pressure and high pressure continues. Generally high pressure stuck towards the south, helping to keep things relatively fine and dry, but this trailing frontal system across northern areas will continue to bring outbreaks of rain at times, could turn quite persistent really into areas of Scotland, particularly once this next pulse moves in later on in the day.